Hello again. We're going for something slightly unhinged today, but what this video is really for is I'm using an unhinged example of something that you can use for perfectly hinged reasons. And I'll explain what I mean. So what I've done is I've used Obsidian to create an image database for all my Stray Kids photos that I've saved. And that's the unhinged part. You don't have to do this for Stray Kids photos specifically, but that's what I've done. And I've got 350 images in here, and they are all tagged and organized in such a way that I can very easily get the images out that I am looking for. And I'll talk about the tags and stuff that I use in a little bit and how I set this up. But what I think you can do with this, if you're normal, is use this for other types of photos, personal photos that you've taken, things that you've saved from your friends. If you take a lot of screenshots for things, I personally take a lot of screenshots of things that I want to look at later. I have a whole category of images that I've saved because I want to draw them or use them for artistic reference. Things like that. So what we're going to talk about in this video today is how I've created this image database, and the examples are all going to be Stray Kids, but with the very important caveat, you can use this for any kind of image that you want. The big reason that I didn't use normal images is because a lot of the images that I have to sort are photos from my childhood and teenage years and I really didn't want to show those on for the whole internet to see. We don't need to go back there publicly, but I would like to organize them for later. So you can see this is a selection of views of the Obsidian database that I've chosen to look at here. But you can see up here I have sections for photos, my art, screenshots, memes. I'll probably rearrange these at some point now that I've worked with the system a little bit more, and I think I want to categorize these a little differently. But everything that I've put in here so far is all in the Stray Kids images section. But we're going to talk about how you can set up a very similar database, and then how you can actually get sets of images out that meet certain criteria, and how you can very easily insert things into the database that doesn't take 100 years, because previously a previous iteration of this project required me to sort of enter all of these properties one by one, and it was really tedious. It was really tedious. Each image took me 3 minutes to put in, and I realized immediately that it was not going to work. So I've created some templates, and I've linked some things together so that it goes much quicker, and also so that some of these views fill themselves out automatically. And the first thing I'll talk about is what community plugins you need to make this work. So really the only one I think you absolutely need is the templater, right? Templater, because I specifically want a template for the image information files, and I'll talk about what's in that template in just a little bit. And as far as I know, templater is the only thing that lets you have templates that are applied automatically to specific folders. So whenever you create a file in that folder, it uses the template automatically, and you don't need to go set it up yourself. It saves a stupid amount of time for this to happen automatically. And then there's some other things I have in here. Data view is what I use for some of the kind of pretty gallery views in here. I'm not going to talk too much about how I set that up, because it requires an understanding of JavaScript, and this video isn't about understanding JavaScript, but I'll show the code on screen so you can look at it, but you would need the data view one, and then you also would need the JavaScript turned on so that it can actually run the JavaScript. And then this one I really just have for fun. It's File Explorer note count, and it adds the little number to how many files are in there. And the biggest thing I use this for is because I have an images folder and then an image note folder. And it's important that I have a note for each image. So I want to make sure these numbers are always the same and that nothing gets mismatched, or there's going to be like some files in there that don't have any images attached. And that's not what I want. And then Obsidian, of course, the program is free. It's not technically open source, but it has kind of open source vibes. And you can use this for all kinds of things. In fact, I have a different Obsidian database that I use for like daily notes and planning things out and learning things and writing things down. But this one I've created specifically for images. So this one is contained. And I think that's another important thing. Having it separated from other files makes it even easier to sort things and have them come up and make sure you're not cluttered with like a bunch of extra tags or a bunch of properties that don't apply here. So I am a big fan of having like a separate database for specific purposes, just like this. Okay, so the thing that's going to apply to everyone, I think, is setting up a Obsidian base, which I think this is included now. You may need to turn it on. Yeah, so there may be some default plugins, core plugins that you need to turn on. Bases I'm definitely using are file properties. Let's see, you may want the properties view turned on. I don't know if you need that on to use properties or just to view them in the sidebar. And then the tags view may also be useful for you if you would like to do that. But most of this stuff is pretty simple. You don't really need a whole lot of plugin stuff going on to make this work. You just need the bases one to get a view like this. So setting this up from nothing, you have your plugins turned on, you have bases turned on, you have templater turned on. The first thing I did was create two folders, images and image notes. And images, as you might guess, is going to have all the image files in it. And then image notes are going to be the Obsidian files, markdown files, describing a particular image. And once I've created my image folders, I do have a template. And this is what makes it so easy to put the images in on the fly. So I've set up templater. We'll go back to the settings here. It's down under folder templates, enable folder templates, put the image note folder, assign this template. Every time I create a note in that folder, it will create this template automatically. And all I've done is populate all the properties that I'm using. So we'll go over exactly what I use these for when I talk about entering the images into the system, but I make sure all of them are tagged with Stray Kids by default. If this was in a different folder, like for example, my photos, I would have a tag that indicates that this is a photo that I took, or it's like a saved like memory style photo. Whatever is appropriate for the type of image that you're templating, you would want to put in here. Maybe you want to put the current year in the image template and then just change it if it's an older one. I leave these blank because the images that I have cross many years, but having the property populated in here makes it very easy. I can just click right in and the date picker comes right up. Same thing with these, because these are like lists of things. Whatever values I put in here are going to automatically come up in a drop-down when I click on them. So really, the only time I really need to do a lot of typing is for a brief title for each image. And then if I need to add a new option to any of these. So I occasionally add new sources as like new videos come out, or new things that I've collected, like photographs from, screenshots from. But otherwise, I can pretty much just like click, 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 and all the options are already here, ready for me to select. In a similar way, the way the images work, I have just picked a default image here, because when I click on it, I can click, let me make it go away for a second. Can I make it go away? Okay. If I click on the image, I can click this little code block and it brings up the source here. And whoops, oh my gosh. And then if I erase this, it does bring up the most recent image that I've added to the system here, right there. So I'm gonna put that back. I've just got this image as the default because this is the one I made the template from. So this one is always here. I could put like a very noticeable template picture here, and then it would help me remember if I've accidentally forgotten to change the image source, but so far it hasn't been a problem. And then I'll explain why I have an image property here in a little bit. But there we go. That's the entire template. It's just got some properties and then a spot for an image, and that's it. Every time I add a new image to the database, in fact, I can add one right now, adding the images from the Hinge and Lover video that I screenshotted. So just drop the image in here, create a new note, and then if I just remove all the text, it will be the very first thing in this list. Sorry, this is kind of bright. It's like a silhouette image. So the very first thing I do when I create a new image note is replace the image path here, and then I copy it up here. And then I can just fill in the metadata. So I usually just sort of stream of consciousness write a title. It doesn't really matter. It can help to search if you put descriptive words in here. There, that's like, this is kind of the thing that I would write to describe this image, so that if I'm looking for this one specifically later, one of these words will probably be enough to find it. Then I go through the properties that have automatically filled in from the template. So I have Stray Kids in here already. I have Hyunjin. I have some tags in here that I actually am using different properties for now that I haven't cleaned up yet. Like the source and also the year are kind of things I'm using instead of identifying like the era, so to speak. Flat Sungmin. Skur. But most of these tags I'm using for the members present in the image, or very specific like groups of things that don't fit into any of the other tags. So if you're designing your own set of tags that you want to use, identifying people who are in them, if they're images of like a certain type of media, like a movie or game, or if it's a like photograph that you took, that may be something you tag, or you may use a different property. Start to think about at the very core level, what kinds of images are you going to have in your database, and how are you going to want to group them later? So we'll get back to that. I also have a checkbox just for is favorite. This is just to create a gallery of like my very favorite ones. Date of image. I know that this video came out on Hyunjin's birthday, which was March 20th, I think. Now I'm second guessing myself now that I'm in front of a crowd. And then I have colors, which I'm just using for creating like cohesive galleries of images. I'm actually not going to include this in any of those, so I'm just going to leave that blank. Purpose, I have things like if it's good for a like PC background, body art reference, face art reference if I want to use it for drawing. Feral is just like if they look particularly hot in that photo. Oh, I do see I have two different background ones. I should probably take one of those out. I don't always do a purpose property unless it's very obviously something I want to use for reference, or I used to put just like fun, but like they're all for fun, so I need to remove that option as well. But just playing around with these, and the perspective I look at this from is like, if I am coming to this database with the intention of finding images for something, this is what I would put here. So most of the time it's like art reference. That's like what I would want to find the images for. Or if I'm memeing around, if I'm looking for something that is like a reaction meme, like I have, I love this one. Congrats, happy for you, nice, but he's got this completely nonchalant face. Something like that. So like the purpose of this one is meme. So if I'm looking for it, it's because I want to use it to reply to somebody or to show them a meme. I hope that makes sense. And then finally, source. This is also used to create like collections And then all of these are obviously like Stray Kids focused. So I have Skiz Code. I have this one will be MV. And also I have a specific one for the lover MV. Put that in there. And there we go. So like it took a while for me to put all these in because I'm explaining it. But if I was just putting them in, it would have taken like a few seconds to run through all these. And then because I've copied it into Obsidian, I can delete the source, which I save a lot of images to my desktop. I never used to do this until I started saving a lot of Stray Kids images. And that's part of why I created this system, was because my image like organization was getting completely out of hand with the influx of like saved memes and whatnot. So I've just deleted it from my desktop. It's now safely in the Obsidian image database. I could look in here. A lot of them have like numbered names. There's like some random threads generated names. As long as they don't overlap, it doesn't really matter what they're called. And then I have my image notes, one for each image. So that's a look at how to put images in. And then once the images have a way to get into the system, you'll want a way to get the images back out, or even just to browse them. So the very first thing I recommend setting up is a base, an Obsidian base. Create a new base. You just go to wherever you want to create it, new base. And this will by default be all the files in like the whole Obsidian. We want to change this so that it is filtered. All views. And let's see, its folder is, there we go, folder is images, and then we want to do image notes, because these ones have the metadata on them. If we just do the image folder, it's going to pull all the individual images, but you're not going to be able to search them. So I have the Omega Male one coming up first. That's so funny. And then you want to go into the view here where it says table, click on it, and then you can change it from a table to cards. And then the image property, I believe we want the image property that we added. So that's why I have that there. And then you can show which properties that you want to display. It could be good to have the tags shown. So you can see here, I just have the tag and the date, but we could also put like the source on here if we want to see if it's like from an MV, if it's a threads meme. We can uncheck the file name if we don't want that shown there, or you can have yours included if you would like to. Whatever you want to show on the cards, you can put in here. I'll just put tags and we'll leave everything else like that. And then there are some other things you can adjust. So like you can make them a little bigger. You can make them fit inside here. You can also change the aspect ratio. I find that most of the images I collect are wider than they are tall. So something like this probably fits a little better if I make the aspect ratio like more landscape than portraits. But there's a lot of things you could do here to make this look how you want it to look. And then we can start creating views. And the easiest way for me to do this is to duplicate what we have. So if I go up here, we've gone into configure, we click on the little dots and we can do duplicate. We can call this one, for example, let's say this one is all the Skiz code. So you set that. If you would like to, you can change the size or the aspect ratio. If you have a view of images that you know are like mostly square images or mostly like vertical, like TikTok GIFs or something, you can change this in the view specifically and make it look correct for what is going to be filtered here. And then for this one, for this view, we want to make sure it's not for all views. We want to do probably tags, no, source, right? So I've used source contains, and then we just want to do Skiz code. There we go. All the Skiz code images that I have saved are in here. I just put all the Hyunjin Cells one in here. Such a funny episode. I took so many screenshots because the captions are like incredible. The captions are so hilarious. Well, we have a lot of different things in here. And you can do this for literally any combination of like filters and tags, sources, purposes. For example, we just duplicate this again. If I want a base that's all face references, images that I've tagged as being good face references, make these very big so I can see them better. And then we go to filter, and instead of source, I'm going to click on purpose. And then the purpose, I've messed this up, I think, by having a value in there. So I'm going to start over. We're going to go purpose contains, there we go, face art ref. So there we go. Some of these are like cropped a little bit weird. I might want to change the settings so that instead of cover, it does contain. But then one thing you can also do is you can click on any of these and you can view the image bigger. So there's that as well. You can go directly to it. And you can also use this to identify any images that haven't been tagged with everything that you need. So like if the date of image is empty. So all these, I have not identified a date of the image yet. So if you have a set of images that you need to go in and update, you can use the base to find them. And all of this is like very snappy because it's not really doing anything with the images. Like it's not moving them around. It's just querying what's already there. And in my experience, it's very fast. It's very performant. As you can see, I've got hundreds of images in here and they're coming up like straight away when I add these filters. So that's kind of the basic functionality of it all. But what you can also do, and what I've done, I'm going to delete this base so it's not in here because I have a different one that I've been using. Okay, and then I'm going to talk extremely briefly about the JavaScript galleries I've created because I really don't want to get in the weeds with the JavaScript, but I think it's important to know what you can do, like what Obsidian allows you to do, because it's extremely powerful. Basically, you can just create any arbitrary HTML with CSS that you want using your data view pages. So here, we've got a lot of stuff like styling and creating like HTML elements. But the important thing to note here is that we have selected data view pages from this image notes folder, which remember is the notes that have the metadata on them. And then from there, we can access the properties in JavaScript. So here I'm accessing the image file, I'm accessing the isFavorite property, I'm accessing the purpose property a couple of times. So we can access any properties that we put on our image notes in JavaScript and create some very like complicated, sophisticated filters. And then this is the kind of like sketchy part. I had to do a lot of Googling to get the relative image path working so that I wouldn't need to populate like the entire image file in here. And this is the code that I needed to do that. So I'll try to make this big on screen, but basically it's app.metadatacache.getFirstLinkPathDest, and then we pass in the image, the relative image path, which was under the image property, and then we pass in the file path. And then the image source, we do app.vault.getResourcePath with the file path that we built up here. And I have some checking, like if the file path is empty, we want to make sure we're not trying to get the path because that will cause a little error. And then we just create the HTML. So you can use your imagination, your Googling skills, you can experiment, you can create whatever you want and generate individual HTML elements for each image. And I've gone and added so that they link to the image. So that's what this is here. If I didn't have this, it wouldn't pop up these little things, which can be annoying, but for me it's more important to have access to the image file. At some point I might change it so the link is like at the bottom or something. But that's how I've done this. And as I've shown, you can do the same exact thing with the bases. literally the only difference is that I think this is prettier. And I had some free time. So you definitely don't need to get heavy into the JavaScript to make this work. You don't really need data view at all. But I think it adds just like a nice level of polish that makes the galleries like pleasant for me to look at. So I put in that extra work. But there we go. That's my unhinged image organization system. Currently unhinged because it only has Stray Kids images in it. It will be less unhinged when I start adding like my actual life photos in it. Then it becomes like a normal weekend project. But like I said, I wanted this to be fun, a little whimsical, and I also didn't really want to show all my personal photographs to the entire world. So this was a safe and silly alternative. But I hope that helped. I have a lot of fun working with Obsidian, and it is like legitimately very useful. Like I can imagine a lot of people have big sets of images that they want to look back at someday, but they're just like a big mess. And this is one way you can do to create a little bit of order and make your images easier to browse. You know, like a photo album. You know, remember photo albums? Anyway, that's all I've got for today. Thank you so much for sticking with me on this one. It was probably pretty rambly as usual, but hopefully it was a little bit useful as well. But thank you. I will see you in the next video. Peace. Goodbye. See you soon.